Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatiron's Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatironstuning.com and stay tuned with Flatiron's Tuning. Alright, well, welcome back everybody to the Flatiron Syndicate Podcast. We're here in the shop again. We've got DP and Wyatt with us. And there's a topic that has been bounced around the shop that we wanted to talk about today, which has to do with daily drivers. And DP, it's because you have had the occasion now, or the opportunity, let's say, to now start daily driving your Forester again. And so now you're kind of living with your project car as a daily driver again, which you haven't done in a while. And so that's kind of, it sparked some things.
Yes.
As far as what you like and what you don't.
Sparked things, that's a good way to put it. Because unfortunately, Tiptoe did send it, windowed the block, and so I'm back in Platypus, which is all right.
Which does answer your question. Can you send a piston through the cylinder wall of a Prius? And the answer is yes.
Absolutely.
Yes,
it does, in fact, have enough horsepower to do so.
90 is apparently where it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, living with Platypus as my daily again has brought forth all the things that I like and are a little irritated to buy.
Yeah.
Like, stiff suspension, stiff chassis, squeaks, rattles, pops.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I think a lot of people, as we start to want to modify or change the car, it's because we're driving the car every day, we're in the car every day, we're spending a lot of time in that driver's seat. Can you make it better?
Mm-hmm.
And so what are some of the criteria, what are some of the things that you think about? Like, Wyatt, I know that your thought process focuses around everything you're interacting with and touching in the driver's seat.
Absolutely.
It's like, how do you, like, when you're building your new car, like,
mm-hmm.
what do you focus on first?
So, like you said, everything that you touch. So, everything in the steering system, everything having to do with the shifting and shifter setup, your pedals, and then your seat is also important. So, the first things that I went through were the shifter, the stock rubber bushings age, and they don't age well, and when it's in gear it can feel like it's in neutral and it's very vague. So I went through and did the Turning Concepts linkage update, bushings in the front and in the back, and then I did a Fidanza short shifter that unfortunately we can't get anymore. But it's been magic for the car. Everybody that sits in it loves the shifter. And then I've done a few other things with steering rack bushings. I put a different set of seats in my car because GC seats would be called frying pans, not buckets, because they are flat, and they don't hold you in the car at all. So when I did suspension and tires, I started getting thrown around pretty hard, and so seats were the next kind of option. There's quite a few things you can do braking system-wise. Not a whole lot of things you can do clutch system-wise, but still things that can be improved on. So,
well, and like with the shifter, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the short shifter is one of the things that, like, that's a lot of people's first mod,
right?
Because you want that shifter to feel a little bit more immediate.
Mm-hmm.
Like on the GC, the GD chassis, the STI, your shift lever, there are direct linkage connections all the way into the transmission.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're moving that shifter, you're actually directly connected to the transmission. Like the newer FA20, FA24 cars, that's a cable shifter.
Right.
So when you're grabbing that shifter, you're actually just moving like something that's pulling cables.
Basically a set of brake cables for a bike.
Right.
I move around under there and pull on levers, and
it's harder. It's much more difficult to get an immediate feel out of that shifter.
Absolutely.
But it's something where, like, it honestly, like you're saying with the bushings, like on the GDs and the STIs, if the bushings get worn, you can get some vagueness there too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I forget sometimes that I hop in a car that's got like an old shifter in it, and you realize, like, I'm not sure where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you get used to driving with a short shifter.
Sure.
So that's definitely like a good thing, because you really want the shifter to be something where you don't really have to look at it, you don't have to really pay attention. You should just be able to, like, reach out where you grab that shifter, you know what gear you're in, you know what the next gear is.
Yeah. And that's the other nice thing about the old school 5 speeds and old school 6 speeds is they, with that directness, they guide you to the next gears very well. So, like, Honda guys are notorious for doing a 1-2-1 money shift.
because it's just artificial.
Because you're just going through cables, exactly. So that's very similar to the FA powertrain, wherein it's a cable shifter and doesn't really guide you well through the gears. So your 2, 3, you kind of have to hunt for sometimes, and then your 4, 5, same deal. You might have to hunt for it.
The new WRX, the 2.4 liter, they changed the shifter, and then they have a sport shifter option, and it seems to be better. Like that one, like for a cable shifter, that one seemed to me to be
decent.
Yeah. Like I would not say that I had issues with like not knowing what gear I was in.
No, I wouldn't agree. But there's from driving the 24.
Yeah.
It had room to be improved.
Yeah,
for sure.
With the cable shifter, I mean
there's only so much you can do.
There's only so much you can do.
Yeah. Without spending $1,500 on one of those sweet billet shifters. And
that's that Dark Matter X. That they actually convert. They take all the cables out and convert it to a direct linkage. So like if you really want to get back to that direct connection, there is at least one option out there for those FA24.
Is it a chassis mount style setup? Because I know on the BMW side of things, dudes do a chassis mounted shifter a lot, but it requires them to use solid transmission and engine mounts.
I don't think you have to change the mounts, but it does mount the shifter to the car.
Okay.
And then the linkage goes from the shifter that's mounted to the car
into the transmission.
Or to the transmission. And that, which is the same as even the first one that they had for the STI, where like the shifter is now bolted to the tunnel. So it doesn't. So there's less movement of the shifter itself because it's just connected.
There's not the weird bar that hangs out under there. And, Yeah.
So there's options, but I mean that's definitely a thing. But
sure,
like
it's a place to start. Yeah, the shifter's a good place to start. It's very easy to modify it. Well, I wouldn't say very easy. It's kind of a pain to dig to it, dropping the exhaust, and then you drop the transmission down a little bit, and you got the drive shaft in the way. But
it's a reasonably doable first model.
It's a long afternoon, is what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, then...
the pedals was a really good point because that's something that I think gets overlooked a lot. Like the clutch pedal, like you say, I mean, there's not a whole lot of variable there. But when you're picking a clutch, how stiff that pressure plate spring is, that is something that will kind of control or dictate what that pedal feels like on the clutch side.
And me personally, I like a heavier clutch. I have an Action Stage 1 or 1 Plus in my car right now. And it holds all the power it needs to, and I like how it feels. It's nice and stiff, but I don't get like worn out sitting in traffic.
Yeah.
So that's very nice. And then it also has a stainless steel clutch line, but that's all I can really change.
Sure. The other thing that I think of there that is worth considering if you're putting a clutch in the car is what type of material of the disc. All right, so on a clutch disc, on an organic clutch disc, there's friction material all the way around the clutch, so you have a lot of range of engagement. So like it's like you go 10%, 20%, 30% engaged, so you have a lot of control on the pedal. But if you go with like a ceramic puck style clutch, that range of engagement gets much, much smaller. It's almost non-existent. A lot of those puck clutches, it's almost like an on-off switch. The clutch is either engaged or not. And so you can get a lot more judder through the clutch pedal because like they will slip, but like at one point in the clutch travel, and that's it. So you have to kind of come up to that point, get that little bit of slipping, and then pop it.
Let the rest of it come out,
And so, like for a track, not a big deal, and it's totally workable. I had a ceramic clutch for a while, and on the street, like especially in rush hour traffic, it was a little bit tough.
Miserable. Yeah.
I'll say miserable. Miserable.
Yeah, it was misery.
Yeah, it was bad.
And those clutches can also get loud.
Yeah.
I've heard clutch squeak from lots and lots of cars. With granted, they're making 500-600 horsepower sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's like that metal grinding noise.
Yeah,
it would grate on my nerves if I was driving it every day.
And I guess like when we're talking about just making a car better, like that would be if you're putting in a clutch, just how that clutch works, what that pedal works like. I mean, that's actually something worth considering as much as capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and part of what we all do modifying dailies is we all like to go faster, right? Sure. So the stock clutch starts to spin when you get above like 250 foot-pounds. You can start to smoke the clutch.
Yeah.
if it's already on its way out, if it's been in the car for a long time.
Sure.
So if you're doing, bigger turbo, getting it tuned, these types of things, you're gonna need to upgrade.
Yep.
So it's all about finding the balance of clutch pedal feel, holding enough power,
Yep.
And not being loud and chattery.
Yeah, multi-plate clutches have become much more available now.
Right.
For a lot of series, especially the STI, like really largely for the STI transmission. But if you're making more power and you want kind of that very progressive pedal feel, you don't want a really stiff pedal. For a long time, everybody was just going to like the most aggressive single disc clutch that you could find, but yeah, there's now actually a lot of good twin discs out there.
I love driving twin disc cars.
Yeah, so you basically get a lot of capacity, and you can have very similar stock pedal
chilled
feel.
out pedal feel.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Both XCD and Competition Clutch make an organic twin disc, and I think ACT does now too. So there's now good options for a twin disc
and it'll
clutch.
hold 600 something, maybe even more than that.
That's the starting point, and some of them go up from there, even with an organic disc, and then you can get into the like more racy ceramics.
Right.
Have more
if you're
capacity.
making 800 or 1,000, which is like 10 people.
Well, that's where it's like, is it really a daily driver?
Yeah,
Like now,
yeah,
does
absolutely.
that really
It's
fit?
not. It's not at all.
The other thing pedal wise that I think is always easy, it's so easy to overlook, is the brake pedal. Because I know for the GDs, the GC chassis, there's something called a master cylinder brace. And on the GD chassis, you have, because when you're pushing the brake pedal, you're basically moving a rod that is actuating the brake booster and then the clutch master cylinder, which is all attached to the firewall. And what you can run into with these cars, not something you really see on the street, but like when you're driving the car, you're getting heavy on the brakes, is there's this point where you're pushing more and you're stopping more, and then you kind of get to this dead spot where you're pushing more, but there's no extra stopping. It almost feels like the car, like, again, this dead spot in the brake pedal. And then if you go a little bit further down, like there's a little bit more brake there, and it's because that firewall is flexing.
Right.
And you can see this. If somebody hops in your car and like jams on the brake pedal, like,
it takes a lot of force.
But not as much as you might think.
Yeah, no.
It's something you can actually watch that firewall move. And so those brake master cylinder braces, they basically pre-tension the firewall so that basically you get more linear brake pedal feel.
Usually it bolts to the strut tower or the strut bar. And then reinforces, I guess is the best way to say it.
Pre-tensions.
Pre-tensions the firewall and doesn't allow it to have that little bit of flex.
But for the pedal, that can make a big difference. Right,
and then there's also stainless steel lines that also, it doesn't help as much as people might think it helps.
It's really more feel through the pedal than actually stopping.
Right, absolutely. And then, at least for my car, there's the option for either a single stage or a dual stage master cylinder.
Yeah.
I had an RS that had the dual stage master cylinder, and then my new L has a single stage master cylinder. I like the single stage better because there's less vacuum assist, so I get more feeling through the pedal because there's less assist.
That one is harder. You got to know more what you're doing there.
Right.
Because like for rally cars, sometimes they remove the booster altogether.
Right.
Like for track cars, rally cars, there can be an argument made where you want to remove the booster, but that's kind of, I would call that advanced.
Yeah, definitely.
Next level.
Yeah, because it's having driven a car on the street with no booster, like you have to get everything right. Pad compound, master cylinder, the piston size,
leg day,
brake setup.
Gotta make sure your leg's real strong.
Yeah, no skipping leg day.
Manual brakes are no joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, so I don't know for daily if I would do it, but if you really want to dial in that pedal feel, maybe.
Right. And that was entirely a luck thing on my part. The old car had a dual stage, new car came with a single stage, so I just left it like it was.
For the GCs, when you're swapping, like when you're updating things, because some of those GCs had drum rear brakes.
Right.
Which, like, that can, like, if you have a drum brake car and you're updating it to, like, STI brakes or whatever, like, that's where the master cylinder size is not right. Like, you can actually, that's where you might have to make some changes like that because it just doesn't work right.
I did swap in because my car was a drum car.
Yeah.
So I swapped in the other master cylinder but kept the same booster.
Okay.
So it is correct at least for my O2 WRX brake setup.
Okay.
And then has the single stage master.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a Frankenstein brake setup, but it works really well. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about here. Is like how can you get better feedback, make the daily better, make it a more enjoyable driving experience.
Yeah.
So that can definitely be a part of it. That's easy to overlook because it's just this thing that's slowing you down.
That you touch with your feet.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how sensitive your feet really are.
Yeah. Especially once you get kind of accustomed to it.
Tuned into the car. Like I've had a GC now for 8 years and it feels like I know the car very, very well at this point. And when there's something wrong, I can feel it in my butt or in my hands or in my foot. So it's also knowing the car, learning the car, spending time with the car to know what you can improve on, what you want to improve on, and then the things that you should leave alone.
Sure. So DP, now that you've been driving the Forester a bunch again, like is there anything that like you've realized needs attention that you kind of were able to kind of turn a blind eye to before?
The suspension.
Yeah.
It's got ancient Cusco coilovers on it, and I need to replace and or update them because they are just way old. I think I put them on in 2008.
Okay.
The car's only had 6,000 miles since 2008, but I never drive it.
That's a travesty.
Yeah.
It's a riot. It's like, the lowest mile STI swapped Forester around. But unfortunately, they've been hard miles.
Yeah.
I mean, multiple track days.
And age.
Yeah.
Like that's, if you have a project car but you don't drive it very often, like that, it's one of those easy things to forget, like time.
Yeah.
Time is kind of working against you.
Yeah, and it does.
Like, you open the garage door and you hear, "In the arms of the angel."
Well,
then you hop in your other car.
Yeah. It's funny, so like my WRX, when I put the 2.5 liter, obviously everything came out, had to put a new timing and everything on it, and I realized that I'm now coming up on 10 years. So I have to do the timing, and I've got maybe 25,000 miles.
Yeah.
So it's
service interval.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
age.
Like, it's an interesting point because like there's really not a lot of miles on many of these components, but they're old.
Yeah.
Right.
Do I really want to try and trust that it's probably going to hold? Maybe going to hold together? Should hold together? Is holding together? I don't know.
Yeah, that was one thing I was going to say about his car is like when it's been together for 20 or 15 years at this point, like even polyurethane starts to break down if you replace your bushings.
Yep.
And then you've got all your rubber components, all your seals, even if they're soaked in oil, they break down, they go south.
It's yeah, I mean, bushings and suspension. So I've now gone through and replaced everything in my suspension now for the second time. So the whole suspension, like, and there's a video on it. It's the coilovers, all new coilovers, all new lateral links, lower control arms, bushings, tie rods, ball joints, all replaced.
Everything you can touch.
And it's like, it was really good when I did it the first time, and then I drove on it for a lot of years. It was my daily for a lot of years.
Right.
And then as it sat, I just kind of noticed these weird clunks and like some weird, like it felt like the wheels were moving around. There's kind of some vagueness in the steering wheel under certain circumstances. Go and replace all that stuff. Hey, it feels like a new car again. You know why? Because it is a new car again.
Yeah.
But it's if you've got a project car that sits even, time can be a real nemesis. And sometimes bushings and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, if you start to feel that vagueness or the suspension, you're getting those bumps and clunks or weird things, it's like, well...
And it's not always the best thing to go full polyurethane on everything either, because another thing we were going to talk about is, can you go too far? Is your engineering, destroying your car?
Yeah.
And
you can be your car's worst enemy.
Absolutely. And or your own worst enemy. And like a full poly or solid bushing car just beats you to death.
Yep.
It sucks to drive. And we've got our Colorado roads that don't get worked on, don't get maintained, and when they do get worked on, it's like they don't even tape it together. They like staple it together.
Yeah.
It's terrible the work that gets done here, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, like when I had to put on my second set of coilovers, I picked something. The Cusco 03s that I picked are because I wanted to be more track focused. But it's definitely, in most cases, a harsher ride on the street. I'm getting used to it, and I'm not regretting it. I don't feel like I've ruined the car, but like, can you make choices? Can you make choices to modify your daily driver that actually ruin the car? And I think the answer to that is absolutely.
Absolutely. Yep.
The big one here that I think is solid motor mounts.
Oh God, yeah.
Solid motor mounts for daily. Is
Even
like,
poly
can be.
is a lot.
Like, no knock against IAG, but like where you've got such a small amount of material to absorb vibration, just a little polyurethane disc, you're going to get a lot more NVH. But I mean, still way better than the solid motor mounts. I mean, every now and then,
much better.
You know, folks are like, I really want solid motor mounts because, whatever reason.
Because it's cool.
Yeah.
I
It'll
think
shake your teeth out.
I think even for race cars, it's like,
brutal.
Man, it's
kind
a
of
lot.
unnecessary unless you're like, 1,000 horsepower drag racer.
And you got to realize, like, not only does it make it a worse experience for you in the driver's seat, but you're now putting a lot of stress through that now rigid piece.
Right.
So,
And you're shocking the drivetrain a lot harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. There's just less rubber to take it up. I just redid my car with, instead of stock mounts, it's group N front to back. Love it. Made a big difference. It's not unbearable. Like, people who ride in my car are like, this thing vibrates more than maybe it used to, or it vibrates a lot. But I've also been in, a solid mounted car, and you can't see straight because you're shaking so bad.
And you don't get the noise nearly as much.
No.
With those group Ns. So the group
not
N,
at all.
it's the stock design for the engine mounts and the transmission mounts, but it's just a harder drum of rubber.
It does.
But it's still rubber. There's no voids in the transmission mount, so it's a more direct connection, and it's more solid rubber. But for the engine mounts, it's just rubber.
Yeah.
So
they do come with different heat shields, though. That's another fun one I found out, is like the turbo cars have a different plate that guards the engine mount from the headers.
Yep.
And the ones in the box don't come with that.
Right.
Take that as you will. But
yeah. We'll have to make sure that's on the website.
We'll
have to talk to the web wizard.
Yeah.
It's because it is rubber, and it's by a hot exhaust component. So.
And then I think another thing that you can do to really screw up a daily is put it on corn. Like, that's kind of, it's harder to find now than it used to be.
Yeah.
Everything has changed with the 85.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's not nearly as available as it was.
I don't think it's being subsidized anymore.
No.
So, like I said, it's harder to find. You burn way more of it. Smells fantastic to most car guys. To everybody else, it makes their eyes burn.
So what we're talking about here is E85.
Yeah, E85.
Lower fuel.
Yes, to E85 is a fuel.
All hell E85, but
Subarus love it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. But it's what I always tell people is, if you can't get it, like if you have to go significantly out of your way,
if you have to burn half a tank to go to the station, what's the point?
Yeah.
Well, and I've never switched to E85 because I've never lived in a location where on my normal to and from work, whatever, that I had a gas station that had it. I mean, I think, where I am now, there's a gas station that used to have it, but they don't have it anymore. It's like I could have done it, but and why that's significant is because you lose fuel economy with the 85.
A lot.
So you
like 30%.
You gain power, and there, you can gain reliability for it. I mean, that's why we're running it in the Pikes Peak.
Oh yeah. No, reliability is a big deal.
But again, like you lose about 20-30% of fuel economy. So if you now all of a sudden can't get 200 miles out of the tank, maybe you're filling up every 150 miles. I mean,
that's
all of a sudden,
miserable.
Filling station location matters a lot.
Yeah, it does. So. And then kind of with that E85 conversation is just making too much power. I mean, if you want to drive around a 500 horsepower daily, do it with a V8.
Maybe, yeah.
It
all depends on the concessions that you're willing to make.
For sure.
I mean, it's and what how much of a priority is reliability for you? Because when you have to make the modifications necessary to make a 500 horsepower Subaru, there's a lot of change involved there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you're going to try and make that much power, like not only do you have to do the turbo and the fueling and all the sporting mods, but you're going to have to probably go in and replace the engine,
Mm-hmm.
and so that makes it a big investment. There are, from like a daily driver standpoint, there are some things living with the forged engine built engine with forged pistons, like
Service intervals.
and the fact that those pistons expand and contract more, you're going to have more blow by when the engine is cold.
Right.
It's much more important to get the engine fully up to operating temperature, which means driving it for like 10 or 20 minutes before you really get on it, because otherwise you're going to have a lot more blow by in that early period, and just the overall life of the engine is less. I mean, generally
50,000 miles?
60,000 miles.
Yeah.
But I would say that's the average normal.
Right. I agree with that. I mean, I've seen them go at 20,000 miles, but I've also seen them go to 80 or 100.
Yeah.
So
usually when they get close to 100K, if they're still going, like, they're pretty loosey-goosey at that point, and there's usually a fair amount of oil consumption.
And a lot of piston slap, and it's really loud. Yeah.
It can happen. I mean, you can get that kind of mileage.
You can absolutely do it.
But it's one of those, like, do you really want to spend all of the money to make all of that power, but then also lose some of the life of the car?
Right. Yeah, it's not a daily driver at that point.
It depends on what are you looking for out of a daily.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you're driving 5 miles a day and the only car that you own is 500 horsepower Monster Subaru, whatever, you're driving 5 miles a day. But if you're like me doing 50 miles a day, or more, it's
100.
It's not viable to have a big crazy turbo 4-cylinder daily driver.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of it comes down to is, like, when you want to modify your daily, you've got to kind of spend some time and, like, really think about what are these pain points they want to improve, what are the pain points they want to modify, and then when you realize what those things are, like, really kind of think about and reach out to Experience Shop, reach out to us, whoever you work with in your area, and, like, it'd be like, hey, I want to make 500 horsepower. Tell me everything that I should know, that what questions should I ask that I probably am not going to ask, or like most people don't ask when they come in and say I want to do this kind of build before I would, like, go down this path.
Right.
Exactly. Sounds kind of like a plug here for the build consult.
Sure.
But, reach out. We do have lots of experience in, various stages of build to get you the right place before you have all the regrets.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's way better to find out what you're getting into right at the beginning of the process than, like, at the tail end.
Yeah.
Like when
after you've spent $7,000 on all these parts, and then you like, this is going to be too much for what I'm doing with it, or whatever. Finding out late sucks.
Yeah. I mean, it, like, something even as seemingly easy as turbo selection. I mean, for a long time, it was kind of the norm where people, when they would switch the turbo out, go into a different bolt-on turbo, a lot of times you'd have to replace the turbo 2 or 3 times to find the one that you actually liked. Because there were so many times people went for the big turbo that was giving them this really high halo power target, and then they put it in there and, like, this is miserable to drive.
It's a dog unless it's in its 2,000 RPM
or
range.
1,500.
Where it's finally spooled up and pulling. Miserable.
It's like you live through making decisions like that, and you realize, like, from a daily driver, like, it's for a track car where you can keep your foot on the loud pedal, keep the RPMs up, and just keep turning laps around the track. Having a car with a narrow power band, maybe not that big of a deal. But when you're trying to go up hills and, like, stay in traffic and merge onto the highway and
accelerate in third gear when you're at like 2,800, 3,000, trying to pull past somebody,
it can make a big difference.
Being able to get on it just a little bit, wait a second or two, and then the turbo comes up at least into 0 to 10 pounds of boost, where it's helping the engine and also starting to consume its own air. That happens much more readily with a smaller turbo, like a 48 high flow, or even I think 16 and 20 Gs get a little laggy on the 2-liter cars.
Yeah.
I mean, like 16G, I drove on my 2-liter with an Evo 316G, and that feels on a 2-liter like a 20G feels on a 2.5.
Right.
And I mean, it's like, to me, on a 2-liter, that's probably as big as I would want to go, as I would ever want to go, unless it's a race car and you're revving it to like 9,000 RPM.
Yeah. So. Oh yeah, and I think being able to be full boost around 4,000 and you bringing it up, if you can drive it correctly, you can get it to start to come on below that 3,500 or so.
Feel a little bit of,
exactly.
A little bit of things happening. You don't have to downshift every time you want to accelerate.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where, smaller turbo. I have 550 injectors on pump gas, and my car makes 300 wheel.
Yeah.
And in like 95% of situations, I'm the fastest guy at the light.
And what that comes from is thinking about, not having a power target, not fixating on a number and just picking things around a number, but thinking about, I'm in the driver's seat, I'm driving this car. How do I want to drive the car? Where do I want the power to be? And then picking the components based on the driving experience, and so that you're actually improving the driving experience versus, ruining the driving experience or changing it to the negative.
Right.
And that's the hard part with daily is, if you're driving this car every day, if you pick wrong, you're going to be spending a lot of time living with this decision, and that's where it can be, it can be frustrating.
Yeah, very frustrating.
Bit. I mean, Forester comes on about 4,000, but it comes on like a freight train. It is like, if I'm at 4 and it's going.
Yeah.
Things are fizzing, things are popping, we are saying, wee! Yeah. But then it's like, you hit the next gear and it's wee again. But if I have to slow down below 4, then it's just there. Like, I think I can.
And that's something where it's so hard because, especially with a lot of the more modern cars, they've done so much wizardry to counter that. You look at the new WRX. You've got the turbo placement right close to the engine. It spools up. It makes peak torque at 2,000 RPMs or something like that. It's way different now than what it was.
Right. Yeah.
So the newer cars have kind of fixed that. But if you've got one of these older chassis, it's like, a lot of times, if you've never driven a car that has made that big of a jump, it's almost hard to kind of wrap your head around how different the driving experience is.
Absolutely. And the older chassis cars definitely have more drama. It's more dramatic. The turbo comes on and pins you back in the seat, but there's nothing until the turbo comes on.
Which is, for some of us, that's kind of part of the appeal.
That's what I love.
It's a weird feeling when you get in one of these newer cars where it's much more linear.
Yeah.
And it's just like, wait, where did the turbo spool up? Oh,
way
back 5 minutes ago. It's always been spooling.
It's not fun to me. That's why I like my older dailies. I'll probably stick with an older daily until someone forces me to not have an older daily.
Yeah.
And then they'll have to pry it out of my cold dead hands.
And that, again, it gets back to the experience of driving. I think if you come at all of this with your daily with that mindset of focusing on the experience of driving the car, and you're trying to tailor it to what you want, fix something that you don't like, all focused around the driving experience, then I think it can be really, really rewarding because, if you make the right choices or you feel those benefits, then the car just keeps getting better and better.
Right.
Yeah. But if you kind of forget about that driving experience and start picking parts for other reasons, then that's where the driving experience can get worse. And sometimes I think it's actually easy to lose sight of what the driving experience is like in the car. And I've seen people where they don't like the car anymore, but sometimes they can't put into words why necessarily until they start. Okay, well, what is the car not doing that you want it to do? What don't you like about the car? Well, I put on these coilovers, but it's way too stiff, and I hit the train tracks, and my head hits the ceiling, and everything flies around the car. I don't like driving it anymore.
That's just a bad choice.
That's what you're trying to avoid, and but it all comes down to the driving experience.
Although those train tracks right there,
I
have to almost stop because it's the Grand Canyon. It's bigger gap than my wheels are.
Yeah, train tracks.
Yeah.
And then you're back up.
Yeah. Just around here, they can get pretty gnarly.
Like I was talking about, the roads here in Colorado are a tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks.
And but again, you factor that in.
Yeah, and that's just what you take into account when you're building a daily, buying a daily. I mean, Subarus kind of, for the state, are the best option as far as something you can drive all year
round. It snows out, like, hey, I'm driving a Subaru.
Yeah, I'm going to go do donuts in a parking lot because I can. Subaru. Yeah. So that's just down to the base level of choice of daily.
Yeah.
Where, like, we couldn't drive a Corvette year-round here.
No.
And we couldn't drive, Ferraris or, something crazy like that wouldn't really be a daily. But something spicy like that is completely not feasible to drive every day.
Just rear-wheel drive. I mean, you can. There's things that can be done to drive rear-wheel drive cars all around or all year round, but, like, when it's snowy and icy, like, man, the benefits of all-wheel drive are significant.
Yeah, yes. Unbeatable.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the fun part of having the Subaru is, like, it's a fun all-wheel drive car. I mean, for Colorado,
we can drive every day.
Yeah, it's just so much fun. I want to talk about, we haven't really talked about handling, why you mentioned it a little bit, but I mean, that is a big part of what can make a daily better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, I mean, what would your criteria be for, or what would you say is like a benchmark for a handling improvement that you would try or aspire to with the build?
Staying flat in the corners, like behaving itself, not trying to get all squirrely. And
stability.
It's got to be planted and feel planted, because otherwise you're ruining the driver's experience. Like, my car sticks, even with, like, one weird coilover. It still is through the corners. It stays real flat, and that is that confidence-inspiring thing. Like, it drives better than it did. It's got sway bars and things to make it that way, so that I like the way it feels when I was driving, when I used to track it when I was young and handsome.
Yeah.
And now it's just my daily fun fast car. It's like, I can still hoon around a little bit and not like, oh, gee, I hope I don't understeer off and miss the corner.
That's one thing you can kind of bring from the race car side of building cars into building dailies, is regardless of what you do, you want it to inspire confidence. So, your brake pedal acting correct and knowing exactly what it's going to do, there's no deflection or weirdness in it, inspires confidence. Knowing what gear you're in all the time just by reaching down and finding it, or you just know because this is how fast I'm going, this is the RPMs I'm at. You can do that kind of calculation in your head really quickly. As long as you know the car well, that inspires confidence. Being super planted in the corners, cornering flat, sway bars and coilovers, definitely inspire confidence.
And alignment in tires.
Alignment in tires. I was just about to say tires are a big deal too. Yep.
So for the family, our daily that's used there is a minivan, and like for the purpose that it serves, it's fine. It's great. Like we're driving 2,000 miles. Like that is probably the desired. Well, at least for all of my cars, that would be the desired platform. Because like if you're going to be in a car for many hours, it's really comfortable to do. But it is not responsive.
No,
it is not. It is not something where I get in the driver's seat of that minivan and like think this is fun to drive. It's not. It's not fun. And part of that, like I was thinking about this the other day, is like just the steering is like compared to the other cars that I drive, it's vague. And like going around a roundabout, it's just like, man, like there's a whole range of steering input that like
does the same thing.
Yeah, it's like, this is not great.
Yeah.
And I mean maybe there's a ball joint or something in there that I need to look at, so I got to figure that out. But it's like that was not confidence inspiring.
No.
Yeah. And I get in my my Subaru or my BMW that I drive most every day, and like man, the steering input is just immediate. The response from the car, I want to go left, and you turn the wheel left, and immediately, like it just turns and it responds. Like that's, I think for a daily driver from a suspension standpoint, certainly like the ability to carry some speed around a corner, feel like the car is predictable and flat. Those are all big pieces, absolutely. But like, I think ultimately I'd say like the responsiveness, like whatever input you give the car is doing it immediately versus like fighting you on it, or like, man, I really hope this thing turns. Like that's not.
And that's not I mean, what we're talking about is fractions of a second here.
Sure.
But ultimately, fractions of a second are the difference between crashing and not crashing sometimes.
And just the driving experience.
Right.
Like when you're driving the car, you're in control of the car, you're giving the car inputs. When you're getting that immediate feedback from that input, that's engaging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like that's like if you feel that connection
with
to the car,
right?
Because like I'm doing these things.
It's like an extension of your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Versus like driving a bus and like.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say driving my Chevy pickup, my '85 C10. It's like got this much steering play before it does anything.
Right.
But that's not what I have the truck for. I have the truck for cool factor, and that's the engaging part of it for me.
Yeah.
As you guys know, everything's about cool factor for me. So, it's not a confidence-inspiring truck. The brakes suck. The steering sucks. But it's cool.
But it's cool.
Right.
It's also not my daily.
Its purpose
it's
is
not
different.
my daily.
And probably, like, especially with that steering vagueness and stuff like that, if something happened where all of a sudden you got to start driving that truck every day, like that's where things like that get old fast. That like you start driving it more and you realize like, hey, this
sucks.
Like, either to get a bigger wheel on one of those bus things, so I can just like
speeding up.
Oh yeah. I've thought about it.
Or I've got to fix this thing.
Yeah.
You know, with like my wife's car, the Flex. I mean, I'm lucky there. It's a 2018 Flex. Super cool. Has all the right bells and whistles. It actually is a very nice daily. It drives like, it feels like this couch. It's got comfy seats, but it's responsive when you want it to be. Like it holds in a corner and it does the things. It has a modest 280 horsepower, but it's enough to like get it going and feel good.
Yeah, and those turbo flexes are kind of bad.
They're wicked.
Yeah, they're gnarly, and I would love to have another Flex with a twin turbo engine, but then I just need to beef the Forester up a little more because
you can't have the family daily be faster.
Yeah,
than
the family daily
car.
needs to be like just a little bit.
There's a hierarchy that needs to be preserved.
I mean, Platypus is an old girl. I've had her since 2006. Like, she's the OG.
Yeah.
But that Flex, though, like, it's fun to drive because we're going back to Michigan at the end of the month, and I'm looking forward to it because it's 2,400 miles of just, like, go.
Yeah.
But still no cool factor, and cool factor is definitely a part of...
cool factor?
No. And cool factors, at least for me and most of us, that's something that should get taken into account for a daily driver.
Cool factor, but also enjoyment.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's I think what this all comes back to is, do you enjoy driving the car?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it keeps it boxy because it's just it's like the Forester, but a Forester limousine.
Well, sure, but it's that enjoyment is such the key,
right?
And it's having a daily driver that like you enjoy driving. I mean, I'm going to work. I'm going to the grocery store. Like, cool.
Send it.
That's right.
Yeah. I think it kind of gets overlooked a lot how much we all do drive. Sure. And people treat cars like appliances.
Yeah.
And if they didn't treat cars like appliances, I feel like everybody would be better drivers and have more fun doing it.
Yeah. And I would to build on that, I would say when you don't enjoy driving the car, when the driving experience is not engaging,
it's a chore to you.
It's very easy to just kind of like think of the car as an appliance.
Right.
And the other thing that's worth mentioning, as far as I think why we do this in the first place, other than just trying to increase the enjoyment factor of driving, is it's really cool to be able to take a car that you picked and you liked, and then you found out, oh, I can make this change or that change, and then you make one of those changes,
you
realize how much like you've improved it. You actually, that feeling of increasing the enjoyment of driving is really cool, and I think it's addictive to the point where that's I think how a lot of us kind of get
snowball effect.
The snowball effect going about like I this is now as a project car. This is not like a utilitarian thing that just gets me from point A to point B. Like now I'm engaged with the car. I'm more engaged with the driving experience. What else can I do? What else can I do to make it better? What else? How much more can I enjoy driving this car?
There's definitely credence to the fact that cars have souls.
Yep.
And I mean, it's metaphysical kind of hocus pocus, but I've been in cars that feel soulless.
Sure.
Volkswagen.
Minivan, yes.
Yeah. But cars that are like just inspiring and kind of fill a hole in you.
Yeah.
That makes it worth driving, and all the headaches that come along with building a project car. The fact that like the car kind of feels alive to you and connected to you, is something that you don't really get with any other like hunk of metal. There's not another hunk of metal in the world that makes me feel like my car does.
Yeah.
So,
and that's I think that's also easy to overlook.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's when we got our minivan, I fought it tooth and nail because it was not enjoyable. Like, there's enjoyable parts of it. Like, the air conditioning is amazing. Like, it's 100 degrees right now. Like, you could frost will build on the vents. So it's like if I had to pick a car where I want to drive this in 100 plus degree weather, like, that thing has got such an overbuilt AC. Like, okay, cool. But again, like, it's just non-engaging to drive. Like, I fought it for a long time trying to find something like the Flex that was at least somewhat engaging, or fun to drive that would also haul the family around. I had to give up.
Very short list of cars, and the cars that can do that are expensive.
Yeah, for sure. There's more now because sports cars have become SUVs, or SUVs have become sports cars, or I don't know.
A little bit of it.
Weird thing is happening.
Durango SRT, ultimate daily to me.
Porsche Cayenne Turbo would be pretty fun.
Porsche.
I know.
CTSV wagon.
CTSV wagon.
A little throwback.
That's up there.
I mean, the Flex Turbo was high on my list,
but
that like finding
cool.
them is very hard.
And even the non-turbo, I mean, realistically, it makes enough power to go, and it was effectively 3 Priuses worth of horsepower. So like it
moves.
It got down, and I'd even notice that when I drive, because I enjoyed that car too. Like, I felt connected. That was 3 years I had that car, and I felt I was like, I like this car, and then I get in Andrea's car, and I'm like, oh my, this is very fast. And then I get the Porsche, and I'm like, what the hell am I talking about here?
Yep. Yeah, you get used to like a slow car, and you just kind of tune out sometimes, or tune in for a completely different reason.
Which is borderline dangerous, if you ask me. You tune out when you drive. Like, that's, I think texting and driving is a big no-no, at least for me. But I drive a stick. I literally can't text.
You have a prevention device built in.
Exactly. I like that. I wish that was.
They're safer because you can't text.
It's safer. It's just like Jeremy Clarkson's. More horsepower means you get home to your family faster.
Yep, sure.
It makes sense. Makes sense to me.
This is science.
The science.
It's just science.
Yeah. It's all scientific.
Yes. All right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here as far as like perspective and why you might modify daily and how you can make your daily better and things to avoid. With all of that said, are there any other things you guys can think of as we're kind of winding down here that are worth mentioning that we haven't touched on yet?
Don't make your car prohibitively expensive to drive and maintain.
And maintain. I like that you added that, because prohibitive to drive on the cost side, it's like, oh, well, that kind of sucks. But if it's like inhibiting your ability to drive it or like maintain it,
if it's $150 oil change every time you do it,
that's rough.
Or you're on E85 and you need to do an oil change every 1,000 miles.
Yeah.
Just that type of thing where your consumables become really expensive. Or
I think it's don't be afraid to take a step back.
For sure.
Like if you do something to your car and you realize that all of a sudden whatever you did now makes it something where I can't use this the way that I wanted to, or it's making me miserable to use this the way that I intended, don't be afraid to take a step back.
To undo things, I mean,
there
are a very small list of things that are not reversible.
Yeah.
Like, when you get into cutting cars up, that's where it starts to get a little on the edge of not reversible. But if you get out the grinder and you're about to cut a panel off your car, think, is this wise to do to a daily? Right.
Yep.
Right.
Just take a pause. Take a pause there.
Take a moment. Okay. That's what I'd say is, like you were saying, don't be afraid to undo something that you did.
Yeah.
I've had to do that.
Giant wheels and tires and fender flares for daily.
Don't listen to this guy.
No thanks.
No?
Don't listen to him. That stuff's cool.
Do it? Okay.
Do that. Slam it. Put it on bags.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
No, that's terrible for a daily.
Depends.
But
well, I mean, people do it. I've seen it done. I mean, but like all of a sudden, like going to this giant wheel and tire where now your tires cost $1,500 for a set.
Yeah.
And like the alignment becomes wonky, and you're starting to burn. Not only are they $1,500 for a set of tires, but now you're going through them twice a year.
Yeah, you need a new set every summer or whatever that is. I mean, that's going back to consumables being too expensive.
Right.
Your car will look great, though.
Yes.
Well, when it's on the hoist every week, it'll look great.
Where the functionality is increased to the point where you want it to be, but it just is no longer sustainable as a daily, then that's kind of the cue. Well, now you need to find a new daily.
It ain't easy being steezy.
Sometimes the project car needs to become the project car.
Yep.
Like that's one of those lines where, the project car the daily has to move into the project car status, and you need something else to just kind of daily drive.
So you buy the next project, right? You buy a daily for your daily.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh man, that can be a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But my thinking there is that if you get a daily that to move the project car off to the side, don't get something you're going to attach and want to tinker with, because if you do, now you've got two projects.
Which is why I bought a Prius as a daily commuter.
Right.
Not another Turbo Forester.
I ran into an issue where I had a Range Rover that I was playing with. It was a classic. It was okay. It wasn't one of the bad ones. It was a classic. 89. But starting to lift that and go off-road and stuff like that, all of a sudden that's eating up money for the WRX project. Mm-hmm. It's everything. I mean, when you have two project cars, everything takes twice as long, because now there's you do some stuff over here. Now you got to do some stuff over here.
This is the story of my life.
Yeah. Then you buy a truck to haul the thing.
I have no regrets.
Yeah.
None.
It can spiral out of control if you get two project cars.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I guess.
Don't even get us started on 3.
No. That is a master class in
misery and pain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ramen, I was going to say.
Absolutely.
Only when it's on sale, though.
That's right.
The pallet.
Yeah.
You're going through pallets of ramen only when they're on sale, because you've got three project cars to keep going.
Yeah. Because you're living in the pallet. You just make a little burrow in the pallet of ramen.
So otherwise, that's all I'd have to say is, don't make your project car prohibitively expensive to put miles onto.
Yep.
Yep.
And don't worry so much about putting miles on it. I know a lot of people that are I don't want to drive it because it's going to put miles on it. It's you bought it to drive it. Go outside.
Yeah.
So don't be scared.
Fall into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think 25,000 miles in 10 years is it's
good.
Not great. But it's better than 6. So
60,000 in 8 years for me.
That's good.
Yeah, it's not bad.
That's not bad.
I mean, it is a true daily driver.
Yeah. Well, and before all of that happened, I literally drove that car every day. So I was doing 15,000 miles a year originally, and then that finally slowed down once I got to about 150K on the thing. So
high mileage Subarus are the best. What about you guys?
Say 128. It's doing great. I love it
I can't remember. I think I'm at 155 now, but I think it's slowed down at 130.
Well, I think the transmission has 40 on it. But the chassis got 128 on it.
223.
It has served a lot of life.
Yeah.
So that's, it's it deserves a little bit of a
reprieve.
Of a break. Yeah.
The smiles per mile. Are immeasurable.
Kind of like what you're going through DP. It is kind of cool when all of a sudden you have the opportunity to start driving it daily and get back into it. So. Yeah, make sure you're driving your project cars.
Yep.
That's why you're doing this.
Go outside.
That's why
if you're not driving
go play.
Take the wheels off, put on jack stands, turn it into sculpture.
Yeah.
Yard art.
Make it a yard art. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yes, it should be a project car to be driven, not a piece of sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Unless sculpture is your thing. That's cool. So.
That's totally cool. I want a DBS for that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the correct application for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed. Very cool. Well, thank you for listening. Thanks for your support as always. Until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning. Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatirons.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.